Welcome to Comic Power. I am your host, Comic Killer 72. This segment today is called Wicked Wednesday. If you didn't know, Wednesday is the new release for new comics that come out every week. These are my recommendations for the best books to pick up on Wednesday. I will also name one book to be the speculation pick of the week. And don't forget, I got some modern key issues up for sale on auction at my eBay, and they're starting at 99 cents. That's going to be Monstrous #1, which is rated a 9.2, and Sex Criminals #1, which is graded a 9.4 and signed by Matt Fraction. The auction ends on Thursday, November 17th around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I repeat, these auctions start at 99 cents and have no reserve. See the description below on links on where to bid. Now let's get to the new comics. First up, DC is giving us Batman #11. The Rebirth schedule has a book coming out every 2 weeks, so you're going to see a Batman book every week because he's got Detective, Batman Beyond. You get the idea. Good old Bats is taking on Bane in this, so I'll have some of that. Next up is Superman #11. The son of Batman and Superman met each other for the first time in issue 10. Now in issue 11, they're teaming up, and that's pretty cool. Next up is Trinity #3. This is a title that's dedicated to Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Made in America since 1938, 1939, and 1941. So pledge your allegiance. Next up is the Suicide Squad #6. This was supposed to come out last week, but it got pushed back to this week. Comic legend Jim Lee is still handling the art and the cover, so it's worth picking up for that alone. Next up, let's see what Marvel is up to, and that's going to be The Amazing Spider-Man #19, which is going to a second print. The first print has a blue cover, and the second print has a red one. This is a tie-in to the Clone Conspiracy miniseries. In addition, issue #21 of The Amazing Spider-Man also drops this week, and Alex Ross gives us another stunning cover for the ages. Next up is Black Panther #8. This is one of the most innovative covers I think I've seen in a long time. It looks like squiggly lines and kind of blurry, but if you step back and squint a little bit, you'll see the image of Black Panther's sister, Shuri. I'll select pause for you and let you do it. Okay, you see what I mean now, don't you? That is very, very cool. Issue #8 also has this variant shown here, but you're better off going with the regular cover because it's so amazing. Next up is Cage #1 of a 4-part miniseries, which is going to a second print. This is a cartoony spoof of the 1970s influence on Cage. I didn't really like the idea of it, but apparently somebody likes it, so it's going to a second print. The Netflix TV show was awesome and it's bringing more attention to the character. Next up is Deadpool Back in Black #1, which is also going to a second print. This is the first print. The second print is going to be a variant. This is issue 1 of a 5-part miniseries, and let's face it, Marvel can do anything with Deadpool. He is their cash cow that they can exploit to the fullest. Next up is The Death of X #1, which is going to a second print. This is issue 1 of a 4-part miniseries where the X-Men and the Inhumans are on a collision course. Marvel owns the movie rights to the Inhumans, but they don't own the movie rights to the X-Men. So guess who's going to win? The animosity between Marvel and Fox is making its way to the comics, which really is a shame to tell you the truth. Next up is Jessica Jones #1, which is also going to the second print. The world of Luke Cage was all up in this comic because she receives a visit from Misty Knight, which is played by Simone Missick in the Netflix show. And at the end of the comic, Luke Cage also shows up saying, "Where is their daughter?" In the comics, Luke and Jessica have a little girl together, which is shown here on issue #2, which also drops this week. The first 3 issues of this series probably will be under-ordered, so they could go up in value very quickly. Season 2 of Jessica Jones on Netflix probably won't drop to 2018. Next up is Thanos #1. Even non-comic book fans know him as the big bad who's pulling all the strings in the Avengers movies, and it's going to come to blows in the Avengers Infinity War Part 1 and 2. They've done several different miniseries on Thanos before, but this is a new ongoing series. And yeah, I'm sold on this. The Mad Titan is no joke. By the way, the first appearance of Thanos is in Iron Man #55 way back in 1973. It's also the first appearance of Drax the Destroyer and Star Fox, Kronos, and the Mentor. This is the first work of a young Jim Starlin, the architect of Marvel's cosmic universe. A 9.6 of this graded goes for about $3,000. Holy cash flow, Batman. Next up is our report on independent comics and small publishers. First up is Joyride #7 from Boom Studios. This was only supposed to be a 4-issue miniseries, but it was so successful they decided to make it an ongoing series. It's the story about some teens in outer space having a big adventure. Next up is Slam #1, which is also from Boom Studios. This is a story about roller derby, and that's always fun. Next up is Grand Passion #1 from Dynamite Entertainment. It's the story of a crook and a cop. They fall in love and things get messy. It's described as Harlequin romance meets hard-boiled crime. That's a great combination. I want a piece of that. Next up is G.I. Joe Revolution #1 from IDW Comics. This is Hasbro's properties crossing over because they're fighting the Transformers here. Hasbro owns G.I. Joe, Transformers, Action Man, and other properties, and ROM Space Knight too. They're trying to make these properties more valuable so they can build them up to do more movies. Next up, and also from IDW Comics, is Yakuza Demon Killers #1. The Yakuza is the equivalent of the Mafia in Japan. It's organized crime. This comic seems to mix that along with the horror genre, so it's going to be a good mashup. Next up is the Speculation Pick of the Week. And that's going to be Harbinger Renegades #1. One day I'm going to do a Harbinger origin story to explain it all because it's just too much information to discuss in this format. But Harbingers are the next phase of human evolution. They're called Psiots in this comic series, which is the equivalent of mutants. These characters made their debut way back in January of 1992. And if you want to get a 9.8 of their first appearance, it's going to cost you about $700. Valiant properties are now making their way to web series, television, and eventually movies. So you want to get on board now if you haven't already. Issue 1 also has this very trippy looking 1 in 50 variant that you might want to pick up if you can get below $10. There will be a future movie called Harbinger Wars, so you might want to pick this issue up from 2012. You might even be able to find it in the dollar bin. Next up is Britannia #3, also from Valiant Comics. This is a fictional story using real life people like Nero, the Emperor of Rome, who sends one of his best men up to their northern front, which is modern day Britain, to investigate a disturbance. This is issue #3 of a 4-part miniseries. The first 2 issues have gone to reprints, so people are really feeling this. It's written by British writer Peter Milligan, who's famous for Shade the Changing Man. Next up is The Ether #1 from Darkhorse Comics. This is from Matt Kent, who is now famous as the co-creator and writer of Divinity from Valiant Comics. Basically, Matt is a science fiction writer who finds a way to make his material understandable for the comic book format without dumbing it down. Next up, and also from Darkhorse, is Lady Killer 2 #3. This is the story of a housewife who moonlights as a contract killer at night. Lady Killer Volume 1 #1 made my list of the top 10 comics of 2015 last year. Volume 2 doesn't disappoint. It actually has a sly sense of humor, which is hard to do in material that's this dark to be funny, but it actually is. Next up is Briggsland #3, also from Darkhorse. It's the story of a secessionist anti-government community that's locked in a power struggle. The wife of the community's leader decides to seize power while her husband is in prison. It's an awesome story. You definitely should be reading this. Let's close with selections from Image Comics. They are clearly winner of my Comic Power Publisher of the Year award, which I just made up, but they do deserve it. First up is Reborn #1, which is going to a second printing. This is the pairing of Mark Millar and Greg Capullo, 2 heavyweights in the comic book business. Issue #2 also debuts this week, so look out for that too. Next up is Spawn #267. Some people forgot that Spawn is still being published, even though it's been out since 1992. I guess the character just isn't as popular as it used to be, but a Spawn movie reboot could turn that around. Next up is Moonshine #1, which is going to a second printing. In this story, a New York mobster sends his people down to the mountains of Appalachia to make a deal with a bootlegger who's got the best moonshine in the country, but they underestimate that bootlegger and this how big of a gangster he is. Issue #2 also drops this week, and this is the type of series you gotta make room in your wallet for. It's just that good. And by the way, there is a Frank Miller first printing variant of this comic as well. I advise you to pick that up while it's cheap. Next up is Kill or Be Killed #1, which is going to a 4th printing. Count them, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is a major hit. I would describe it as Kick-Ass meets The Punisher. It's a very dark and creepy but entertaining story. I think you'll like it if you like this genre. Issue #4 also drops this week, but if you haven't caught on to this by now, you might as well wait for the trade. And last but not least, Peter PANZERFAUST. This is returning after a long hiatus. Just like Chew, this is one of those oddball books that somehow became a hit that had a print run of less than 5,000. Issue #1 is crazy rare, and it used to sell for about $300 as a 9.8. It's dropped a little bit, but it still sells for about $175 today. This is the story of an American freedom fighter who's fighting against Nazi-occupied Europe. That's about it for today. Thank you for watching Wicked Wednesday, where I review all the new comic books for a new comic day. Be sure to follow my blog at comicpower.net. On social media, follow me at facebook.com/comicpower.net and comicpower-universe.tumblr.com. And don't forget twitter.com/comicpowersub. I also sell comics on eBay at this link. This is Comic Killer 72 for Comic Power saying bye-bye. And don't forget to share this video, click on subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and tell everyone you know about this channel to help it grow. Thank you for your support.